Hey everyone, welcome. Today is Friday, January 19th. We're going over chapter 10 of Unlearn Your Pain, and that means there's just two more chapters after this. And I have to apologize. He always talks about in this book not being too perfectionistic and not feeling like you have to go through everything and get everything done. And I inadvertently did that for you guys. I don't know if you noticed, but there's a whole little section after the writing exercises of chapter 9 that I didn't notice until after we had done book club. It's because I used the PDF version and it's digital. And so once I got to those writing exercises, usually those are the end of the chapter. And I didn't realize there's a few more pages and there are a few more exercises that he talks about in chapter 9. So once I realized it, it was a few days after. So I figured the best way to address it was just to take a few minutes at the beginning of this week to go over what was there in chapter 9. You can feel free to give yourself an extra week if, the writing assignments feel like too much. Definitely, there's a lot of information. There are a lot of exercises and meditations. And even though he says this is a 28-day program, I don't know anyone who has done everything in this book in 28 days. He even says, don't feel like you have to do all of the exercises. So people are saying, no worries, no problem. I figured you guys would be nice about it. And I just try to have a lot of compassion for myself when things like this happen. I used to be a really bad perfectionist. That was something that I almost prided myself on. And so when things like this happen, sometimes I've even developed this attitude of like, I'll get the information at the time in my life when I need it. And so, sometimes I'm like expecting something to come out at a certain time or for me to do it at a certain time. And then just realizing, it's actually better that I got that information that week later. And that was a better timing for me. So you might even think of it that way. So anyway, I did feel like it was worth going back over just because there is some good stuff there. Otherwise, I just probably wouldn't have mentioned it and would have skipped over it. And, no one actually emailed me noticing it and telling me you might have noticed it. And it was not a purposeful neglect of those topics. I just literally didn't scroll down far enough until I was looking up something else. So yeah, I love that. I'll get the information at the time when I need it. That really helped me when I was starting this work because there is so much information out there. And I was already thinking of like, I want to help other people with this. So I was especially like, I need to learn all of this, not just for me, but for other people that I'm going to be working with. And there's just hours and hours and hours of podcasts and different resources. And so I started to just trust myself that if I was really drawn to a certain podcast, to listen to that one and to not worry about starting at the beginning and doing all the episodes and overwhelming myself. So I think when we change our beliefs like that, we can actually prove those kinds of things true for us. And it helped me take a lot of that weight off of my own pressure that I was putting on myself. So I'm going to just go to the end of chapter 9. It won't take too long. We can go through it pretty quickly. But Dr. Schubiner does talk about internal family systems. And I'm like not an expert on that necessarily, but I've heard about it here and there. And when I did his training for practitioners, he did spend one whole week talking about internal family systems. So I thought it was at least worth mentioning here. And so remember last week was the dialogues towards understanding. And this one way that you could look at it is this IFS or internal family systems approach. And again, this is not what it has to be or the only way to think of it, but maybe this is the way that really resonates with you. So just thinking of it, we are all made of different parts. This is normal to have conflicted feelings about things. So I might really want to do my job because I get money from it, but then there's some aspects of my job I don't really like, or I might want to care for my elderly parent. And then I also might have this rebellious teenage part that says, I don't want to do that. I don't want to have obligations. We might want to get healthier and we might want to eat Oreos at the same time, right? So this is normal. This isn't like a sign that something's wrong with us. And this can actually sometimes be a coping mechanism for our brain to protect us from stressors. So, for example, if you were criticized by a parent growing up, you might have developed a strong internal critic that protects you from being less than perfect to avoid more criticism, right? So, just realizing some of these protectors, these protective mechanisms, we didn't choose, and they just developed as we developed and grew up as a way of keeping ourselves safe, more in this primitive brain kind of way. So they talk about managers, and these are traits like perfectionism, internal criticism, putting others first, never standing out, like just be small, don't let everyone, don't be too big, don't get too much attention. So overworking, not letting others get close to us, and feeling insecure and needy. So if you resonate with any of those, these are like developed traits that we developed because of how we were raised, probably, and the way that our nervous system and primitive brain thought this is the best way to protect you. If you are a perfectionist and do things perfectly, that will keep you safer than making mistakes and getting criticized. And then if we feel particularly threatened, and our brains really feel endangered, there could be protectors known as firefighters that just take over. So again, these are the way that we're seeing this is these are trying to help. They're trying to fight the fires. So this could include binge drinking or drug use, sexual promiscuity, self-harm, thoughts of suicide, severe pain, anxiety, or depression. So in this context, the mind-body symptoms, I was going to say most, but you could really think of it as all of these mind-body symptoms are just different manifestations of protectors. So in this way, we can be compassionate with our brain. It's trying to protect us. It's not trying to betray us. Sometimes we're like, why am I in a war with my own brain? And if you're feeling like that, then this internal family systems and the parts might be something that you can integrate and start to see, I'm not at war with myself. There's just these different parts that have different roles. And the more I can befriend them and work with them, that'll be better than trying to like eliminate parts of me, to fight with those firefighters, right? So when we have those firefighters or those mind-body symptoms, usually we react with the 6 Fs. So this is a little bit of review. Remember, the 6 Fs are those ways that we might react to pain or other symptoms when we get it. We could have fear, we would focus on them, we would fight with them, have frustration with them, trying to figure them out and trying to fix them. So unfortunately, when we react these ways, you put more pressure on yourself. It leads to an increase in the danger or alarm mechanism and more pain and other symptoms, right? So you have a symptom and then you fight with it, or you focus on it, or you obsess about trying to fix it. It actually sends the message to the brain, there is a danger signal. There's something we really need to worry about, and then creates more pain. So we can just recognize these protectors are simply different parts of us. We can examine them, understand them, and learn from them. And we could see these symptoms as messengers of sorts. As he says before, it can be a barometer of an underlying situation, right? So sometimes I use this example of like sending an email and then going into a freeze response or having some symptoms from it. And so even though in my logical brain, I'm like, okay, this is just sending an email, or this is just a conversation with a person, these are just words, there's part of me, like a scared child, that is worried about it or scared about it. And so I might have some symptoms as a protector, and those symptoms can actually be good information for me. It doesn't have to be, okay, there's a problem I need to fix. It's just like, oh, okay, there's that part of me that, doesn't want to be rejected. And so it makes sense that part of me, even though I wanted to send that email, part of me was a little scared about it. So the internal hurt or insecurity or emotional reaction that needs to be identified can be brought up when we have these symptoms, right? It's like a good thing. We want to know if, what's going on with our thermostat and where we are. We want to know those numbers or whatever. We want to have that feedback from our body. And that can help us explore and process. Okay. Oh yeah, someone was saying all of this talk about firefighters made me think of stop, drop, and roll. Except here, stop, drop, relax, roll on. I love that. That's great. Yeah, exactly. It's like we our attention comes to this certain thing because we have a symptom, but the way that we react to it doesn't have to be in this urgent, frantic, dangerous way. In fact, when we react to it differently, it trains our brain not to keep producing that symptom. So, last week was the dialogues. You could do a dialogue with that protector. So you could ask it, the pain or the symptom, these questions. What message do you have for me? What specifically are you protecting me from? What are you afraid would happen to me if you didn't take over my life? At what point in my life did you begin? How old was I? What was happening at that time? So there are a lot of writing exercises, and this one he doesn't even have a space in the workbook for all of these questions. But if this is calling to you, this could be something that you take out some paper and ask your symptoms some of these questions, thinking of this symptom as a protector. So, like, I think he gives an example in this chapter 10 about a woman who was sexually abused and then developed foot pain. And she realized that she didn't stand up for herself, and so this was signifying, like, you know standing up for herself or putting care on herself. And she took like a self-defense class and things like that. So again, it doesn't necessarily have to be my pain isn't resolving, so there's got to be this underlying thing that the pain's telling me and I can't figure it out what it is. That is stressful to think that way, but this could just be that invitation of, like, maybe I actually have a dialogue with this symptom and ask it and get some insight that way. So he has a series of meditations. If you've heard now, there's several, and they're all at unlearnyourpain.com. And if you have the book or the Kindle or any of those versions, it has the password. And so one of the meditations is dialogue with the subconscious mind. So if this is curious to you, if you're curious about it, if it's interesting to you, this is a guided way to go into the subconscious mind. And just remembering, there's this childlike component, there's this parent-like component, and the subconscious is not always rational, yet we're able to communicate with it. So I just screenshotted these so you could have an idea of this exercise that I totally didn't even see was there last week. So this is an exercise talking about things that you're going to commit to do. And we'll talk a little bit more about this week's chapter, why it's important to start doing activities and to do fun things and to have more play in your life. So you could think of activities, just brainstorm things you'd want to do this week, in the next month, in the next 6 months to a year. And just even taking the time to do that might be something you haven't thought of. Lots of the time we're wanting to not have pain, and we're wanting to like resist doing things that might cause us any stress or any more pain. And so just taking the time to think of, like, what do I want to do? What kinds of things would I want to start doing, and start really small. And things for myself, Like this is an important part of the healing, is not just doing stuff for other people. That's probably the habit we've gotten into, but what can I prioritize to do for myself in a loving way? And then to act on your commitments, this is an interesting way that he says it. Hopefully you can see that okay. You can actually, there's a worksheet for planning and carrying out commitments. So if you're someone that wants a little more structure and this doesn't feel too overwhelming and like dictatorial, you can have this action you want to do, when you plan on starting it, how you'll accomplish it, what steps do you need to take, what help or aid will you need, who can help you, what strategies can help achieve your goals, what barriers might you encounter, how will you overcome them. And it's actually really cool because I've, certified as a coach, and in the coach training that I did, this is a lot of the process that she taught for how to achieve goals, is to think of like the goal that you want, all the things, all the little things you'll need to do, step by step, what those objections might be that your brain's going to come up with, how to overcome them ahead of time. And then he says, even, I make a commitment to this activity by this date, and you sign it, right? So for me, this seems a little more like strict than some of the other exercises. So if it doesn't resonate with you, that's okay. But like I said, I just wanted to share that that is in your workbook too. And if nothing else, instead of thinking of what you can't do and the limitations that you have, you're starting to think of what you can do or what you want to do. And these commitments don't have to be like, exercise an hour a day. Maybe it just starts with, I take a 5-minute walk per day or something like that. Okay, so that is all we missed from last week. And then, oh, I guess I can keep that screen share on and go back to this week. Let's see. Where's that? Okay. So then this week's, okay, I guess it's just on here. Okay, so chapter 10 is about, I forgot what it's called exactly. It's called Creating the New You. So just in general, the principle that the way that you talk to yourself can have great effects on how you are and what you do. So we might think that some of these things are, this is just my personality. Oh, I'm just really stupid. Oh, I make mistakes all the time. Like these are thoughts. These are just habits of thinking that you've created about yourself, and you can create a new you. So the more you at least recognize there are things you want to change and then act in ways that you're consistent with how you'd like to be, with small changes, your self-image will change. So this is a process that you don't go from, oh, I'm not worthy of love to like, of course, everyone loves me overnight, but these small changes do make a difference. And in general, the more often you choose to live in love, hope, and joy, the more that will be who you are. And so the story he tells this little story that I've heard as the two wolves. There's one wolf inside of you that's like negative and hateful and spiteful, and then there's another wolf that's kind and loving and compassionate. He tells it like I think a wolf and an eagle, but which one grows? It's the one that you feed. And so then there are some writing exercises for week 4. There's several. And some of them are just some brainstorming activities. So the first is a gratitude list. And I just wanted to read you really quickly because I did a book club a few months ago about Deb Dana's Anchored. And one of the cool things I really liked was she talks about some of these feelings that are positive feelings that we can cultivate more of and the effects that they have on our body when we do. And she actually says, this is shown in research that physically, when we enter a moment of gratitude, our heart rhythm changes, our blood pressure drops, our immune function improves, our stress is reduced, we sleep longer and deeper. We feel more joyful, more alive, more generous, more compassionate, and more connected to others. We experience more life satisfaction and less burnout. So, lots of great reasons to try on purpose to cultivate more gratitude. Like it actually helps our immune system. It's crazy, right? So, doing this exercise of gratitude is just, he has like a spot for you in the workbook, A through Z, writing things that you are grateful for. So anything you can think of, having a roof over your head, food to eat, the sun rising each day, a color. I've never thought of that. I'm grateful for the color pink. Friends, family, etc. And then you can even think of things that you're partly grateful for. So, a difficult person or a difficult situation might have taught you an important lesson. So, you don't have to try to like sugarcoat everything. Oh, I'm so glad I was, subjected to abuse as a child. No, you don't have to, you know, have like, you don't have to like, you know what I'm trying to say. If it doesn't feel genuine, you could look for some of the silver linings from it. But also, there's usually some kind of lesson that we've learned or some kind of strength that we've developed. And so thinking of that in that way could be a more helpful spin on something that you're perceiving as negative that has happened. And then a forgiveness list. And this is another one that can be kind of touchy, right? Like, some people feel a lot of pressure to forgive and they're not quite ready if there's, been a lot of abuse or hurt. But at the same time, when we're holding on to this, when we're harboring resentment over long periods of time, especially if we don't acknowledge it, that can be a major factor that perpetuates mind body syndrome. So just realizing, I don't really want to love that I was treated that way, but at the same time, holding on to resentment and, continually thinking about how I was victimized and hurt continues this process of physical hurt in the present moment. And if there's no direct action we can take to resolve the situation, we're left with the emotional pains that serve to exacerbate physical pain. So our current pain can be emotional wounds that haven't healed. So like with abuse or a car accident. I was thinking of one guy that I saw in physical therapy who had gotten injured on a job years ago, probably like 9 years before, and his shoulder was still hurting. And even as he talked to me about what happened, you could tell he was so upset that, they had been neglectful at this job and there was some hole that he fell in or something. And it was like he was reliving that thing from 9 years ago with all of that anger. And it was still really emotional and painful to him. So it is an act of power. You could think of it as something you can do for yourself in a powerful way and self-preservation to live your life by letting go of fear, resentment, and guilt. So again, this is probably easier said than done, and this is not trying to minimize what people have been through and their struggles, but we also know that people's struggles themselves don't define who they are later in life. There might be some people that have been through horrific abuse that end up, becoming motivational speakers and inspiring a lot of people. Or there could be people that relatively suffered less and they're still holding on to it. And that's causing them a lot of suffering. So you could think of it as this post-traumatic growth because again, each of those opportunities that we're not super happy about, um, there is some learning from that. Like we learn we don't want to go through that again. We learn to stand up for ourselves, hopefully, or to, not accept that kind of abuse in the future when we're an adult. So post-traumatic growth is a way to reframe what we've been through in a more empowering way. And then we probably need to forgive ourselves. Most people, like myself included, and most people I've worked with, we're actually harder on ourselves a lot of times than other people. We might be like, oh, my parents, they were abused. They didn't know what they were doing or whatever. But, we say, well, I should have been better. I should have stood up for this, right? So just notice if you are turning that anger towards yourself in guilt. Guilt is an extremely powerful emotion that's at the core of mind-body syndrome in a large proportion of my patients. That's what Dr. Schubiner says. So pain can be a way of punishing ourselves. So it's really tricky, right? If we're thinking like, well, this thing really did happen and I was at fault, trying to see ways to forgive yourself, release that guilt is so important for your healing. And Mary says, I love this quote from Judson Brewer in the book Unwinding Anxiety. Forgiveness is giving up hope of a better past. Ooh, I like that. Yeah, giving up hope of a better past, right? The past is something we can't change. The more we're stressing about something that's outside of our control, the more stress we have in our current life. So, you know, some of these things, we just look around, no one has a perfect life. Some of these things happen. Some things are very tragic and horrible. And forgiveness is so important if we're holding on to some of that. So your forgiveness list could be those who you would like to forgive or release feelings towards, those who you would like to ask for forgiveness from. So it might be, before I knew about this stuff, I treated my children in a way that I'm really like guilty about now and embarrassed about, and I didn't know any better and I could have done better, but forgive yourself, please. And then, or ask for forgiveness. And then the last one is to forgive yourself, right? So I'm just thinking of this example with a client I'm working with now who she had something happen with some person. That person kind of showed up back in her life and she addressed this with him and said this was really hurtful and there was some abuse. And he didn't even remember it. He didn't even respond in the way that she thought he would respond to give her that closure. So she was really like, if he could just apologize, I think I would feel so much better. But she didn't get that from him. And maybe that person has passed on or they're no longer in your life. And so, this process of forgiveness doesn't have to be related to that person or how they react at all. This is something you can just do with yourself and in your own mind or with a therapist or coach. um, and then there's this list of barriers to getting better. And this is a really interesting concept that probably a lot of you that have chronic symptoms can relate to, and we don't often like to admit or talk about, but the pain can become part of our identity. And in a weird way, it can become comfortable. So he gives this example of a woman who had back pain, and then she started to develop anxiety and sleeplessness when her back pain started to subside. And we know this is common, right? This is the symptom imperative. This is what happens when our brain and nervous system are rewiring. New symptoms can come up. And she said, I can't stand the anxiety and the sleeplessness. Give me my pain back. At least I'm used to my pain. So see if you relate with that. Again, just to normalize, we kind of get used to where we are and the certain amount of pain that we have or the identity we have around it, and can be thrown off when it's something new, even if it's something better in a way or towards progress. Just realize we may, sabotage ourselves or create more pain again because that's what we're used to. And then you may have been used to a life where the only thing that's constant is your symptoms. So this is something predictable. And I've heard the brain would rather have something that's predictable and uncomfortable than an unknown. So this is just part of the process of rewiring. It's very normal, but it could be a barrier to your healing if you're not aware of it. So your subconscious mind can hang on to symptoms because they could help us. So you might avoid certain situations or get some things that you would need. So, for example, you might have maybe you're on disability and you're not having to work anymore. And although part of you does want to get back to work, there's part that, is like, I don't really want to go back to 40 hours a week. That sounds really hard and stressful, right? Chores. There was a physician once I did a consult with that the things that hurt her hand were all of the chores around the house, vacuuming, folding laundry, doing dishes. And she was a surgeon. So she's like, I've really got to like protect my hand. This is my, she was the breadwinner of the family. And so she was like not having to do these chores because of that hand pain and that justification. She needed her hand for work. And this was not conscious, right? This is not something where like, oh, I'd love to have a ton of pain so I can get out of doing chores. Most of us would rather just do the dishes and not have the pain. But at a subconscious level, our brain can decide that for us. And there's that benefit in a way, right? So again, this is not to beat yourself up or be like, oh, I'm faking it just so I can get out of chores. No, none of that is going on. But, as you're starting to heal and these things are starting to come up, oh, now I don't have an excuse of why I'm not attending the family functions or going to certain social obligations, right? So some of us, like he talks about earlier in the chapters, the pain can come up as this danger signal to protect us from going to these things that we're not really comfortable going to and don't want to go to. And we may obtain sympathy or attention. This is so common where people say, as a child, my parents really didn't pay attention to me unless I was sick, right? So subconsciously, they develop symptoms to get sympathy or attention because that's the only coping mechanism they had as a child. Or may feel that we're very strong or a martyr. My pain is so bad, and if everyone realizes that, then they'll see how strong I am, right? Or maybe you're involved in a lawsuit. Like this is a really tricky one where if I get better, I might not be eligible for this compensation in this lawsuit. So it's very easy to see, you know, that conflict could be going on subconsciously. And then, yeah, back to the chat. Oh, yes, I can relate to the symptoms coming up when she was healing from chronic migraines. The other symptoms, the other sensations were confusing to me and scary. It was good to realize it's just my brain giving me a different sensation to focus on. Yeah, a lot of times you're like, okay, I'm used to this symptom. I know how to handle it. But when I get heart palpitations, oh my gosh, does that mean I'm having a heart attack? This is new. This is scary, right? So this is part of the process. This happens. So he mentions one woman who was not sure her husband would pay attention to her if she didn't have the mind-body syndrome symptoms. Or if this man did get better, it would mean that he could have gotten better several years earlier. So these are very subconscious. Look for any of these that might be going on in yourself. And everyone is likely to have some hidden barriers. So there's a writing exercise for gratitude, forgiveness, and barriers. So choose topics that you think are important to you or that will help you get better from these lists. So we've already done these lists of gratitude, who we would forgive, and those things. And then there's a list, he has a place for barriers. And then you could take the top 3 that you're thinking of for each of these areas, and each day do a free writing exercise with these instructions. I'm grateful for blank, and this is why. I forgive blank for blank, and this is why. Or you see this, ask forgiveness or forgive myself. So it's just taking that list that we've done and writing a whole page about it and why. And then the barriers, my mind may prefer to hang on to my symptoms because these reasons, and but this is why I choose to get better now. And this is how I'm going to overcome this barrier. Okay. So lots of things to think about. And then an exercise of being open to and accepting of yourself. So most of us, this is how I was. I really think this was most of my body symptoms was because I was so critical of myself. Like if I, got 10 compliments and one criticism, I would just focus on that. Or I would, even if I didn't get a criticism, I could get 10 compliments and still think in my head, yeah, they're probably just saying that. This is really what's going on. I mean, I think that that was my protector of like, if I'm perfect enough, then I'll be safe. And so I was always scanning and looking for things that I wasn't perfect with and just focusing on those so I could, quote unquote, improve or be better. But it was really negative and it was hard. So how do you feel when you're kind, open, and accepting of yourself? How do you act towards yourself and others? And examples might be, I feel happy, or I notice calmness. So he has a place you can list how you would feel. And this is a choice. So it doesn't always feel like a choice, but it can change over time. If you wake up each morning, decide to be open and accepting of yourself that day, and allow that concept to sink into your heart and mind every day. Try to feel the feelings that you listed each morning and remind yourself of them throughout the day. So over time, it will become the way you experience yourself in your life. And so you could list the characteristics you want to emphasize in your life. So you might want to emphasize being more kind to yourself, being more outgoing, calmer, happier, more assertive, or worrying less. And then there's a place where you can list situations that you're likely to be stressful of over the next weeks or months. So you might know that every time we have like this family dinner, it's stressful, or every time I go into work, meetings, frustrations, symptoms. And this is the writing exercise of how the new you would respond. So from the list you've created, choose one situation that's likely to be challenging, write your role in the situation, controlling what you can as you imagine it. And they've actually shown that visualization is so powerful in creating different results. And so I screenshotted what this looks like. You're thinking of this situation. My boss called me into his office for a meeting, and how will I respond? What characteristics will I bring into the situation? And you could write the story of the situation as you would want to do it, as you'd like it to play out, with you as the new you as the prime actor. Right. So it doesn't mean you're going to do it perfectly when it happens, but at least if you've given it some thought and you've practiced reacting in certain ways, then you're more likely to have that effect that you want. So, maybe you're like, the next time my mom criticizes my weight, I want to react in this way and just be more neutral and change the subject and right. Just like however you might not want to be happy about it, but even just being more neutral or calm will take, some of that reactivity and pain and stress away from it. So there's another meditation called The New You, where he says, again, take time to actually visualize the images that he's talking about, like how you might feel. So picture being open and accepting of yourself, and picture how you would feel, how you would react to others, or how you would react to the events and situations. It's a lot like the writing exercise, but it's a guided meditation. What characteristics would I like to have? What kind of person would I like to be? When my, you know, child is throwing a tantrum, instead of yelling back at them, I want to be the kind of person that just takes a breath and, asks them how I can help them or whatever, right? So you could think about those things, and you could picture yourself doing an activity without the pain or dysfunction. completing an activity or task easily and effortlessly. And picture yourself being healthier, stronger, and more able to do these things. Picture the new you as being happier, kinder, and more loving and forgiving to yourself and others. Picture yourself being grateful for the things you have in your life. And yeah, this is Roseanne. Yes, this is one of his meditations that if you look on his website, he has that you can listen to, but he also does a summary of the meditation in the book. And that's what I'm summarizing here. And just a word about reprogramming the brain. The pain reprocessing continued. This is continued throughout the book, reminders. There's this meditation about mindful awareness. So when the pain, fear, or other symptoms arise, practice just sitting with them. That sounds a lot like somatic tracking, right? Observe them. Allow your mind to engage with them without fear. Label them as sensations rather than pain, anxiety, or other symptoms. And then you could play with the symptoms like color, changing the color or putting glitter or sparkles on them. So again, here's another option for meditations. Generally, if you remember at the beginning of all these exercises, he says to choose one meditation per day and one writing exercise per day. So don't feel like every single day you have to do every single meditation and every writing exercise, right? It's more, it's like Netflix. Here's a list of a bunch of different things you can choose from. What do you feel like you're in the mood for today? Don't have to watch everything on Netflix. Okay. And then this is so important. I wanted to say this earlier. I knew this slide was coming up. If you're having trouble feeling compassion towards yourself, which is really common if you're used to, criticizing yourself. I've even had people that when they start to feel good about themselves, they've been conditioned to believe that that is prideful or vain, or it's like they shouldn't feel good about themselves. That's dangerous in a way. So you can start by practicing feeling compassion towards someone or something else that's easier for you to love. So maybe you have a child that's very dear to your heart, and you can think of, even though there's these things that I don't always like the child does, like I have so much love for this child. Maybe it's a close friend. And for a lot of people, an animal can be that thing that they first can feel compassion towards, and then they could use that same feeling of compassion towards themselves, or even someone in the news. Sometimes it's so much easier to feel compassion for someone else and a story you hear than to, have that compassion for yourself. So encourage yourself to feel kindness, to send out compassion to that person or animal, and then extend that same compassion to yourself as a child or when you were under stress. So sometimes people will get a picture of themselves when they were 5 years old, and it's a little easier for them to have compassion for this sweet little child version of themselves, and they can start with that. And then another way to leave pain behind is to focus on positive things in your life. Connect your brain and its neural pathways to them. So I usually use that analogy of a spotlight, and our spotlight could be shining on all the negative things and all the things we don't want. And we can actually have some control where that spotlight goes, and we can focus on things that help us feel better on purpose more of the time. So the more you do that, the more you're training your brain to activate positive pathways. Just even teaching your brain it's safe to start to think in these ways. It's safe to feel content and happy. We don't have to always be looking for the other shoe to drop or waiting for something bad to happen. We can enjoy and focus on positive things. So look for moments that are interesting, curious, happy, or peaceful, and take time to allow those feelings to flourish. So back to a Deb Dana reference in that book, Anchored, she talks about glimmers. And I really like this concept because that's how it usually starts. It's not like, oh, I felt good for a whole hour. I was in bliss that whole time. It's usually just a little glimmer, like, oh, I just, was sitting on the porch and I saw the stars in the night sky. And for just a moment, I felt like, okay, Life is good. It's going to be all right. I got this. Right. So little moments, when you train your brain to look for them, you will notice more of them. So, but again, don't frustrate yourself. So many times people are like, yeah, I felt good when I was meditating, but I can't meditate all day. And that was only for 5 minutes, or I felt good for 2 minutes, but it didn't last. That's okay. That's how we start to shift that spotlight. But just notice that it's going to start with these little glimmers at first. So keep your eye out for them. You might start with just one glimmer per day. And then before you know it, you're like, oh, okay, when I was smelling the food I was cooking, that felt really good. And then when I sat down and held my warm cup, drinking my tea, that felt really good, right? So you start to notice all those things that do feel good, and that's less time that your brain is feeling bad. This technique really turned around a recent and longer flare up or expected flare up. Yeah, Roseanne, I love this part of it, right? Like I think of we're decreasing the things we don't want and we're increasing the things we do want. And sometimes we're working so hard on doing it right and fighting these things and getting our anxiety down, getting our symptoms down. But equally or more, let's focus on what does feel good to us. So look for things that to do that will help you access these feelings. So you might start to notice, I have my clients sometimes write a joy list. And so I realized I love seeing a dog with its head out the window. That's just so cute to me and so fun and so sweet. And I like the feeling of clean sheets, and I like watering my plants sometimes, not always, but there's like things that I'm like, I didn't realize that I like that, but that's really satisfying and that's really fun. So visit people who you enjoy. Watch or listen to enjoyable movies or TV shows. Sometimes like people kind of like some reality TV and they blame themselves or think it's bad that they, do this unproductive thing for a little while. That's okay. We want to just have some happy things in our lives, some things that are distracting, some things that are funny, dance or sing. So practice being kind to yourself and to others. The more you take time for positive things, the more time your brain is healing rather than suffering. So I feel like this is sometimes the neglected part of our healing, is to focus on the positive and do more of that. And I personally have had actually family members criticize me for being too selfish and you know, like not being responsible enough. But I really feel like, me going skiing once a week is so important to my soul and my body and how good I feel that, I'm like, I'm not made to be this machine that works all the time. And I'm actually more productive and helpful to other people when I give myself some of this relaxation or playtime. But you might get criticized by other people. I know I have. And, I just have to say, well, they don't understand it and they're suffering with a lot of symptoms that I don't have, because I have really learned to put myself first, which, can sound bad, right? It's a reframe. So you may have learned personality traits like putting yourselves last, right? Neglecting your own needs, being self-critical, not caring for themselves, not standing up for themselves, right? I was checking every single box when I started this. That's exactly how I was. I, I couldn't really be happy, because if there was someone that wasn't happy, that was my responsibility, I couldn't be happy, right? So this is a reframe, and it's going to help to tell yourself that you are a good person, you are important, that you count, and you matter. Send messages of kindness and caring and love to yourself. Do this over and over again. Changing your relationship with yourself is the most important work you can do for healing. So this isn't just about, you know, changing the stressors or doing all of the exercising or exercises. This is a lifestyle change. And the biggest part is becoming more compassionate and loving and patient with yourself. So, dealing with difficult situations, standing up for oneself is often the key to ending painful relationships and the beginning of healing mind body syndrome. So, remember, it may not always feel good to stand up for yourself and tell your family, yeah, I am not working all of this time. I took some time to go skiing and to, do something that was fun for me. And, you can stand up for that in yourself. And so here is a list. Here's another strategy you can use for these writing exercises that you can do to brainstorm and how you can implement it. So making a list of things you need to do, things you should take care of, things that are important for you to resolve, even if they may be difficult, and then choose 2 or 3 items from the list, decide what you might be able to do about them. At this time, you might just free write to recognize your feelings, or you might write an unsent letter. Like with this person who she wanted to address her abuser, and that guy just didn't even remember it had happened. So you can still do this work even if that person isn't compliant, isn't around. And so think of an item from that list. Think about what you could do about it in the next week or two. Choose an initial plan of action and write it. Set a deadline for accomplishing it, and figure out who can help you, who can give you advice. Can someone go with you? How could you accomplish the task? What barriers are there, and how you would overcome them. Make a commitment to this task. It may be very difficult, but you will feel much better after you accomplish that. So after you accomplish it, you also can take time to write a paragraph celebrating that, describing how you felt and what was accomplished. And then, yeah, facing fears and choosing a new life. Remember, the stories we tell about ourselves have great power over ourselves. So you can take a piece of paper. This is not in the workbook. Just take another piece of paper, divide it into 2 columns. On the left column, write fearful thoughts, and on the right column, write opposites. So here are some examples. I could be paralyzed. And then the opposite, I'm not paralyzed. I might die. I will live. I could kill myself. I will not kill myself. I'll be in pain forever. I will recover from pain. So, right, we're just writing the opposite. And often we'll find that the opposite is at least as true or more true. So at the bottom of the page, write something like this. I can choose what I believe. I choose not to live in fear. Fear will arise, but I can handle it, even though it's uncomfortable. As I face and tolerate fear, it makes me stronger because I can handle it. I choose life for myself. I will not fear having fear, so I can be free. You can shred or destroy, like you cut this in half, you keep the opposite side, and the old thoughts that are fearful, you could burn them, shred them, tear them, and laugh or smile at those fearful thoughts. And you could, if you're doing it on your phone, you could just delete those ones. Okay, so these again are more ideas of exercises you can do. And if you're not really resonating with every single one of them, pick the ones that are calling to you the most and do those, and don't feel like you have to do every single thing. But this is really a cool opportunity to just recognize what those fearful thoughts are and what the opposite of them is. Okay. And then fear doesn't just reside in the mind, it also lives in our bodies. So we can have this mindful approach when we feel the emotions of fear, the feeling of fear, and embrace those emotions. So there's a meditation for that called Embracing Emotions. So when you begin to feel fear in your body, tell your brain that the brain is producing these sensations. They're not harmful or dangerous. And try doing something active like exercising, walking, dancing, that takes that fearful energy and uses it in a positive way. So even like the very beginning of this, I was like, you guys, I'm feeling a little nervous because I feel like, I didn't get to this other stuff and there's a lot to get through. So even just acknowledging like, okay, this feels like a little more activation than I want when I start a call. So just talking about it and being mindful of it helped me release that. So, okay, there's a lot of things to consider if you're not yet improving. So, even by this stage, you might have some ups and downs and not really feel like this is working for you. So, number one, erase the doubt. It's very common to have some difficulties truly believing your condition is caused by your brain. This is normal. So many people, almost everyone, like if they still have pain, they're like, well, it's probably the tissue damage, right? Or maybe I just can't eat that food. So every time the pain rises up, fear is activated. And fear, in this case, stands for false evidence appearing real. You could remind yourself of that. That's all the fear is. Be patient. Don't worry if you're not seeing immediate results. Don't try too hard. If you get stressed and upset and put pressure on yourself, you will actually take longer. So be patient, avoid fighting your symptoms. We're not trying to get rid of the symptoms. We're just trying to change how we react to them, and then the brain produces them less. Keep working. So trust this program, trust in yourself, choose the issues you think you need to work on, and use the writing and meditations to deal with them. Make sure you do the reprogramming the brain exercises, and don't forget to take time for yourself. 4 is expect some ups and downs. Just realize it's normal to have some ups and downs. Uh, the consistently sending messages of safety is important to turn down the danger signal. When symptoms return, try to be happy, even though that may be hard. Sending a message to your brain that you are not in danger. This message works to reprogram the brain out of mind-body syndrome. So some of these are just kind of summaries of what he's already said. It's review, but the people that realize that it takes time to recover and have some ups and downs are more likely to recover quickly. So know thyself. Everyone has done things they wish they hadn't, or things that they're ashamed of. Everyone has things they wish hadn't happened to them. The more you're able to be honest with yourself and kind to yourself, the more you'll be able to accept yourself and let go of some of the stressful emotions. Find inner strength. It's often helpful to look back at your life, identify the times you have acted decisively on your behalf, find the strength to keep going, and work through any emotional issues and life situations that come your way. Find contentment. This is like one of those that I really like. Find ways to be content or happy, find things to be grateful for, do things that you like that give you pleasure, find ways to relax, do things for others that will give you happiness, okay? And do something, become more active, complete lists of activities you would like to do, include some things you can start doing immediately. The more active you are, the less time you'll have to be in pain and the quicker you'll get better. So you can write your new life story in a new way. This is another writing exercise that you could choose to do. First, you write your old story where you emphasize the negative things that have happened and how you tend to be limited by this view of yourself, like as a victim, but keep this part of it short, right? You don't want to just like go into pages and pages of all the bad things. We don't want to dwell on it, but you just have this as a contrast. And then you can take those facts and then put a new twist on them, what you've learned from them, how you will overcome them. Emphasize the positive things that have happened and your positive reactions. And then emphasize your successes, things you have accomplished. And this is an opportunity to view yourself as a hero. It's that hero's journey. If you watch any movie or read any book, the hero doesn't just float through life without any struggles. There's this time that they, have struggles. Things are difficult. You don't think they're going to get through it. And part of the hero's journey is overcoming those things. So seeing those things from your past as, this is that part where Harry Potter was, really struggling with all of these spells and he didn't realize he had all this power, right? So whatever your favorite story is, look at that. And that hero has gone through some difficult things and think, okay, that's that old part of my life, or this is where I am right now. But you're kind of writing a new ending for your movie. Okay, last thoughts. These chapters are so long. Okay, he just reviews some things. So how we view stress is critical in determining how it affects us. People who feel that stress is harmful to their health are more likely to develop physical illnesses. So we can realize that some stress has helped us. Significant life difficulties can lead to an overall improvement in life for some people. That's that post-traumatic growth. Studies have shown that people who are ready for improvements, as well as for setbacks, do better in the long run. So, if we're thinking it's going to be easy all the time, we're going to have more difficulty when those setbacks happen. So, just realize it's normal to take a great deal of work to develop the self compassion that we need and the courage to take control of the symptoms and leave fear behind. But that is our process. That's what we'll do. So you can say, I realize that my mind will produce symptoms at times when I'm stressed. Dr. Schubiner says he still gets symptoms. Sometimes I don't even know what's causing the symptom or what I'm stressed about, but I tell myself, I'm an MBS type of person and I get MBS. I can't allow that fact to bother me or ruin my life. It's part of my life, and the symptoms will come and they will go. And one of the best ways, again, this is a review, but it's sometimes we need to hear it like 1,000 times, right? One of the best ways to overcome mind body syndrome is to devote yourself to something that leads to that state of flow. So, flow is when you're just like time collapses and you're not worried about anything and you're distracted. So, that might be work or hobbies, relationships, sports, other activities. A lot of us were like, all the things I used to like to do, I can't do anymore because of pain. So this is your challenge, is to find new things that distract you or that get you in that state of flow until you can get back to, the physical exercise or whatever it is. And then there are many benefits of play. When you engage in activities that are simply fun, you engage a part of your brain that turns off pain and other mind body symptoms. Yes, you guys, I know a lot of you, we've gone over on time, so a lot of you are going. That was the last slide. I was just like, we're going to get through it. But yeah, that was the last slide. I was going to read this from the chat. I had talked with someone who had hurt me years ago. They said they had not even remember it. Then about 20 years later, this person came to me and apologized and cried, thanking God that they had the chance to have this talk with me. It was amazing. It made me think too that this person wasn't ready to deal with that when I was, and had to trust the timing. So good. Thanks for sharing that, Marcy. So you guys, I know we didn't have we had no time to like get your feedback other than through the chat. So hopefully you were able to put in the chat the things you had comments or questions on. I really appreciate that. Next week, we'll be going over chapter 11. And there was one question from Marcy about what coach training I did. So I did a general coach training before I did the specialization in pain stuff. So you don't have to do it that way. There are many coach certification programs. The one I did was through the the Life Coach School with Brooke Castillo, which is a year-long training, because I like coaching in general. I wanted to really have a lot of mentorship and experience. It was one of the more expensive programs out there, but I felt like it was a really thorough and good program. So that is an option. There are also other coach certifications just for general being a coach. But as far as being a pain coach, Dr. Schubiner has a practitioner training. So maybe you're already a medical professional or you're interested in this, you could do that training and you can even coach people after that. Coaching is something that is not licensed and regulated state by state like other medical professions or therapy. And so you can do those pain trainings like through Dr. Schubiner, and then Alan Gordon also has a really good one that I've also done for learning how to do the pain psychology center approach, PRT. And they will even put your name on a list once you've completed it so that you could be listed as, someone who's completed it who can help others. So it's kind of interesting. You might want to check into different versions of coaching if you're interested in that, or if you're looking for a coach, just know that not everyone has the equal same amount of experience. And so I try to just really cover my bases with both general coach training as well as the specific training for pain reprocessing that I kind of specialized in later. All right, you guys, thank you so much. Those of you that stuck around, I know we went over on time. We will go over chapter 11 next week. I think we'll get through it faster. And I made sure we did this whole chapter this time, so there's nothing else to go back to. But again, just one last reminder, just take your time. If this feels overwhelming and this is a lot of information for this week, it doesn't have to all be done in 1 week. Some of these topics are heavy. These are lifelong changes you'll make. So, maybe you take 2 weeks to go over this stuff. Totally fine. Or you come back to it at a later time. All right. Have a great weekend, guys. We'll see you next week for chapter 11. Bye-bye.